All right, so I thought I would talk a little bit about. I would try to. I thought I would try to tie a video by Pints is Here or something. Pints is There about a darker shonen protagonist, and I was like, oh, what's so dark about that? And basically, it's gone to seinen or adult manga or anime levels of gore and brutality, and they call it shonen regardless now. So I thought I would mention a few thoughts on the development of society since 2005, tying into these darker elements coming into play more and more as time progresses. And maybe give some advice for anyone being able to take it, and principles to address a common feeling in almost everyone that the world is getting worse, at least in the West. And I'm going to try and make it not left or right based, but I don't know if I can or not, or if I'm just too deep in the right wing to understand the left very well, particularly, or anything like that. So basically, what the guy did is he said Naruto equals strong hope. Jujutsu Kaisen represents perseverance in the face of hardship, and Chainsaw Man represents basic survival against the cruelest of worlds. And judging from a little bit about the little bit that Pints is Here or whatever said about a character in Chainsaw Man, you could basically draw them and Griffith as a couple, if that makes sense. You know, so. Um, Now, if you've heard me before talk about my situation, I grew up in a relatively wealthy area with a rather abusively strict father in some ways. Um, but I had advantages. You know, he was a provider. He taught me to stand up for myself against people who bully me, and I used that on him. So, you know, he kind of provided the cure for the poison he was providing in one regards. Um, and my grandparents were university level teachers who had a certain wisdom of the world and a lot of care and gentleness and love and compassion and so on. So I've always been between love and justice. Basically, love and justice. Now, growing up a little bit in young adulthood, I couldn't really function properly, doing minimum wage jobs or anything like that. Even though I was trying, I just couldn't do it very well, and I kind of moved out of gainful, like even minimum wage employment, into paper routes and being on disability and so on. But disability paid about twice as much as rent costed for any given spot in the city, except for the most expensive. And then I got into a relationship that lasted only a little while, and there was a breakup, and I kind of collapsed emotionally for a while, and then My mental health took a decline with possible schizophrenia. I'm not sure to this day whether it's signs from God for real or it's just schizophrenia or it's some combination of both. It's a little mysterious to me, even with a fair degree of self-reflection on the matter. However, if I recall correctly, I was told that it was part of a training regimen by God to become a saint, and partly also a punishment for wrongdoing in the past, a little combination of both. So it's a bit of a redemption through punishment accepted for wrongdoing and help given to others. However, my current status is I'm paid about the same amount as regular rent is in my city now. So I live in a rather cheap apartment that really shows its cheapness and so on in a rough neighborhood. But that's where I can do the most good with my limited resources. Directly helping the neediest, the poorest, the most miserable bastards and bitches in the entire city. Just sitting outside, smoking, and offering them a cigarette when they pass by. It doesn't seem like much, but they tend to remember it a little bit. They appreciate it from what I've learned, generally speaking, from them talking to me about it and so on. Months later, if they come by again or something like that, or just saying thank you, you're a lifesaver or something like that, in the moment or something like that. So my trajectory is strong hope, like thinking I'm going to become a politician or a computer programmer. I'm going to rule society and help it out and be smart about what we should do with our collective resources. As a child, I still studied politics, I studied philosophy, I studied history, I didn't study religion until about 6 years ago, or 4 years ago, or something like that, and Christianity specifically the last 2 or 3 years. But I did study psychology a little bit as well, early on and so on. So you can tell my trajectory in terms of my skill set and so on. Those 3 Japanese shonen, Naruto, Jujutsu Kaisen, and Chainsaw Man, represent a beginning approach of enforced wholesomeness and optimism to encourage children to have a sort of a 1950s stereotype, gee golly willikers, dad, kind of father knows best, leave it to Beaver. Oh god, what's that show called? The Andy Griffith Show. Sort of or I Love Lucy, kind of like enforced positivity kind of approach by showing it propagandistically. And then Jujutsu Kaisen, and this is specific to children's entertainment, I should say, or teenagers' entertainment. Jujutsu Kaisen breaks the mold a little bit. And Chainsaw Man as a shonen is basically, from the description that this Pints is here described it, is like Berserk for teenagers, even though Berserk is read by teenagers when it's meant for adults. And you know how that goes. You know, like I watched Conan the Barbarian with the naked woman and all the bloodshed and the revenge and rage and all that death and stuff like that when I was 13, and Barbarella with a lot of nudity and sexual references when I was 13. So, you know, it's not that I didn't have access to adult themed stuff. My dad and I would watch these movies and like war movies and stuff like that. So I got a early appreciation for the harsh aspects of cinema, at least, while living a somewhat tougher life, but still silver spoon sort of in a half sense, at least after about age 8. I think we were relatively poor before age 8, but we had a big house from grandpa getting the mortgage early on and so on, and paying it for his whole life. Um, and, yeah. Now, I'm just going to interject a little personal statement here, and I don't know if it's true or not, or anything like that, but if I was genuinely promised things from God, like I think my friends specifically detailed and gave me information on that they should never have figured out on their own, unless someone who knew the future told them it. I'm going to be rescued from poverty in a bit of a minor miracle, in a sort of comedy of errors kind of way, by the return of my ex-girlfriend. The only girlfriend I've ever had for 4 months, with 1 week together in person. And the reason why I'm giving all this sort of tragic sort of thing is because I want you, the viewer, to know that I understand the difference between all three of those themes of Naruto's hope, overwhelming hope, or lots of hope, big hope narrative, growing up with that, because I was in a privileged neighborhood with a privileged education and so on, to a sort of disappointing but still somewhat passable Jujutsu Kaisen sort of existence, into a very Chainsaw Man sort of experience, almost, in a way, or like not as bad as Chainsaw Man, obviously, but like, you know, in that direction, a little further development. And that mirrors the development of Japanese society in its shonen shonen shows, I guess. From peak optimism to a little tragedy hidden you in the gut to remind you that tragedy is a real thing, to a constant string of tragedy. And basically, the reason why I'm mentioning my personal life in this regard is to explain that, yes, I know exactly that trajectory. And the reason why I'm explaining that I think I'll have a minor miracle rescue me from poverty is to say, I don't think God is going to keep me through that tragic trajectory or direction forever. So I'm going to be one of the lucky ones, maybe. So with those credentials in mind, I've got a set of rules for, or principles for living a life you don't regret, in a sort of Jordan Peterson kind of advice kind of way, slightly, but in my own terms. And basically it is, do the best you can and accept your limitations. Don't think you have to do the impossible. The impossible is impossible. Only God can do it. You, on the other hand, can do limited things. Do those things. And if it means like giving a single cigarette to one person a month, do it, you know? And this ties in. Okay, I said it was left or right, or not biased towards left or right, but this ties into my personal belief in what right wing stands for and why I like it, which is there's an emphasis on government doing everything for us, and we just have to give them more power and money and influence, and they'll solve all our problems. What I've learned is you have to do it yourself, or no one else will. For the day-to-day, the day-to-day kind gestures to the needy and the poor and the suffering and so on. Um, there's enough people in the world where, on average, someone will do something that you cannot do or you don't want to do necessarily at the time. Take a break, that's fine. You don't have to be the icon of charity and kindness and compassion 24/7, 365 days a year. Just do what you can and accept your limitations and don't burn yourself out too hard. And if you burn yourself out, take a break and then get back into it and then look at yourself on occasion just like a status check, kind of like how you look at a health bar on your character screen in a first-person shooter once in a while to see if you need to pop a healing potion or something. You know what I mean? Like a status check. Like, look at yourself as a status check, not a not mirror on the wall who's the most beautiful of them all or whatever. And remember that power-hungry madmen love to tell you about all the good you can do through them. They'll tell you to rebel within their rule set for rebellion. And they'll tell you all about what they can do and try to distract you from what you can do for your fellow man. And also, okay, I said I would do left or right, but there's a thing here, which is this is the very right-wing part of it, the very right-wing statement. Personally, I believe that a lazy and selfish people is the natural fertile soil for socialism. A moral and productive people is the fertile soil for democracy and republic. Socialism is the end result naturally. That's exactly what you're going to get out of it for lazy and selfish people. And republics and democracies are the natural result of a productive and moral people. So you need to focus on what you can do for your fellow man for the most part. If you're in a position to take the resources for yourself in order to redistribute them to the needy, you should take the bare minimum necessary to get by with a maybe 10% more than that or 15% more than that at most. Just a little bit of disaster money, saving up, potential nest egg sort of thing, while draining minimal resources from the task of actually helping the needy. And you should push for that particular viewpoint to be more prevalent in society, and so on. Maybe for the top spots that are typically held by people near the end of their life in politics or charities as the very top leader or something, maybe you could get enough to maybe when you're 30 as a man or 35 or 40 as a man, and I don't suggest 25-year-olds do it, men or women. And women typically need to have children by about 35 before, or they won't be able to have any. But basically, the man has an advantage in that regard. But basically, when you're 35, look for job. By the time you're 35, sorry, Look for jobs that pay enough for you to afford to take care of a wife and 2 children yourself and have a house, hopefully. And support governments that make it cheaper to own a home yourself. And support governments that reduce the amount of money the government takes and reduces the number of programs that are niche and minimizes the number of employees to do the maximum benefit of helping the poor and needy who cannot fend for themselves. Efficiency. And what you'll find, I think, is that you need a lot less money for centralized control of the economy and so on in order to do the basics of taking care of those who cannot fend for themselves. That's specifically advice for those who redistribute wealth, government, NGOs, charities, stuff like that. But also, even if you're doing that efficiently and effectively, it always helps if you have a little bit to spare to give something to someone who doesn't have something themselves. And doing it yourself, just do it yourself, you know? Do it yourself from your own resources. And do your best doing that. And maybe you can't be perfect, and that's fine. Don't beat yourself up. But just do your own best, you know, and maybe eventually you'll get better at it than you ever could have before through sheer habituation and learning and so on. And if you do, that's good. And if you don't, that's fine. Just do your best. And even if you can't do very good, doing your best means no matter how stacked the deck is against you, well, you did the best you could. It's literally the best. What more can I say? Sometimes, admittedly, one's best is not good enough. And people suffer and die as a result. Once in a while. But if more people just did their best, then the amount of suffering and so on would decrease. And the thing about death is everything that lives dies. So don't worry about the fact that death exists. It's just a natural part of life.